appreciate it with so many other things on. What I will be presenting here tonight is the rationale and research behind a method of measuring colour energy in Bronze Age seals through the use of digital devices and colorimetric calibration techniques. The purpose of such a method is to assist in discussions of colour and light phenomena in relation to Aegean seals, which I will do in the context of my doctoral thesis. I must stress the preliminary nature of this talk, as it's only intended to introduce you to the ideas leading to the creation and use of the colorimetric method and the rationale for doing so. It will unfortunately not be an exhaustive exploration of the implications or outcome of this research, as these are yet to come pending further data collection. Visual phenomena, including colour, can be understood as the relationships between the interaction of light with material objects and our perceptions of these. Rather than an objective quality, colour is a calibration of our perception to the variability of light and a relational mode through which our visual system passes light into notes. Aegean Bronze Age seals are colourful. Over their long history, they have been made from various materials, from bone and ivory, local Cretan serpentinites, to imported stones of the chalcedony family. Homogeneity of colour is rare in Cretan seals, especially after Minoan II, when minerals begin to be used in preference to ivory, bone, or paste. MM2 marks the beginning of the use of the drill lathe or bow lathe, an archaeologically invisible event that has been inferred as the cause or facilitator for fundamental shifts in seal shape, size, and material. I've been seeking to map and understand the aesthetic changes in preference for seal material between MM2 and LM2, or roughly the end of the proto-glacial period until the beginning of the final glacial period on Crete. What can be seen from a quick overview of published data on seal materials in this period is that colour variegation and translucence increases with the use of hard stones for seals. For example, imported silicon dioxide such as chalcedony, carnelian, and agate, and porphyritic lapis lacedaemonium. Similarly, many minerals local to Crete display noticeable variegations, as in the case of some steatites and breccia. Beyond this, unfortunately, it is difficult to compile colour information from published data for various reasons. Firstly, black and white photos are standard for the publication of Aegean seals. Secondly, colour is only sometimes included in the description of a seal, and where colour information exists, it is cursory, subjective, and cannot be related to other colour descriptions. Also, the application of categorical terms for minerals masks subtle differences which may be meaningful, especially in relation to variegation and translucency. Black and white photographs with heavily angled lighting are excellent for viewing the seal intaglio, but their sole use has the effect of privileging the importance of the engraving over that of the material properties of the seal. This is echoed in sometimes cursory descriptions of seal materials, and also that the definition of mineral categories have not always been consistent between scholars, a point which the Corpus de Minoan Mechanischen Seal, otherwise known as CMS, project in Heidelberg are currently engaged in correcting through their online database. The identification of stones and minerals comes from their optical and physical properties, such as cleavage, scratch, crystal structure, etc. And traditionally, in application to gemstones, compositional categories are also subdivided on the basis of colour. For example, the silicates, sard, sardonyx, agate, chalcedony, carnelian, and jasper. These terms reference visual properties and have long been used as gemological shorthand for particular colours and characteristics. While affording greater nuance in application to Aegean seal stones, they have often resulted in increased erroneous mineral identifications and confused categories. The terms sard, sardonyx, and onyx have been jettisoned for the more neutral descriptions carnelian or agate, with which they overlap. However, while streamlined mineral terms are certainly more accurate, this has also reduced what can be inferred through publication about a stone's colour by its mineral identification, effectively masking intra-categorical variation. Yet in some cases the opposite is true, as the introduction of greater nuances of terminology within the soft stone spectrum has led to necessary categorical conflation where they often cannot be discerned. In particular, there is a little nexus of tricky materials, chlorite, serpentine, steatite, and schist, all of which can be shades of green, grey, cream, brown, black, and which naturally occur on Crete in close proximity to each other, and which can be ambiguously similar. In these cases, assignment to a category can be quite arbitrary, and this is reflected by the common use of hybrid categories such as serpentine schist or steatite serpentine. I would argue that the definition of these materials does not matter so much as the individuation of their aesthetic properties in relation to colour and variegation. In this respect, colour analysis could provide a different way of cleaving otherwise ambiguous categories. So, in undertaking its study of colour and visual properties of siltstones, it has been necessary to revisit the material to establish a baseline. And to conduct this study, I have questioned exactly what, if anything, can be inferred or derived from the study of colour in seals. Colour in the case of seals may speak to their technological, social, administrative, economic, and possibly even religious aspects. But why should it be considered meaningful in relation to these dimensions? And why should a visual angle be taken over others, for example, a haptic one? Because as I will argue, the visual properties of seals are integral to their function as both social and economic objects, and because it is likely that their aesthetic properties will be one of the primary criteria in the selection of seal material. In this sense, colour may also have relevance as in a diagnostic capacity. Exploring visual properties might tell us more about chronology, material availability or provenance, aesthetic preferences, function, material properties such as wear and durability, and technologies such as heat treatments. What has been missing, however, is a robust framework for the study of colour. Over the last 20 years, although mainly in the last 10, studies of colour have emerged in application to a Gene Bronze Age material. As I will soon outline, these are a varied approach and method, and while they have constituted exploratory work, I feel that future studies could benefit from a consistent, reproducible and atomised system for measuring colour and light phenomena, something that is now possible, cheap and even easy due to recent expansions in research in visual phenomenology, computer systems and colour theory. Such a system can be used not only to consistently record colour, but act as a record of light-object interaction and surface properties. For instance, gloss, which is expressed as the texture of smooth or roughness, or matte or shine, and also translucence. However, while this system of recording will have application in other contexts, I don't intend for my model to be universalising. Rather, I'm arguing that it's applicable mainly due to the nature of the materials I'm exploring, which have reasonably fixed, observable properties that can constitute an internally consistent colour space. Also, I see it as complementary to, rather than a replacement for, other forms of analytical measurement such as compositional analysis. So tonight, I will first give a brief overview of Aegean seals, then address the study of colour in archaeology before moving on to a discussion of light phenomena, colour and perception, after which I'll outline my methodology for a reproducible measurement of these colour and light phenomena in application to Aegean seals, and then end with a brief discussion of the possibilities from my preliminary data and future directions. Colour has always been a dimension in the appreciation of ancient materials, and quite rightly, it's inseparable from the study of the material itself. However, through the conventions of archaeological literature, colour has been somewhat disconnected from form in the use of line drawings and black and white photographs. These conventions emphasise the importance of form over other features, including colour and scale. In the case of seals, iconography has been emphasised to the neglect of other material aspects, largely as a result of the traditional influence of connoisseurship in the field. This influence of art historical methods can be seen particularly in the dating of material, where the study of origin through stylistic technique is the keystone, and has ultimately sought the identification of groups, workshops, and hands. The legitimacy of a stylistic glyptic chronology is a subject of debate, but it is nevertheless used commonly in Aegean patristic studies. Current dating techniques of seals are based on an overall appraisal of shape, material, and manufacture, but in the end, dating can come down to stylistic detail. Koszkowska notes that as few as 35% of late Bronze Age Aegean seals have a known provenance, and of those, fewer have a meaningful or informative context, which leads the majority of seals, those obtained through collectors or as stray finds, to be dated stylistically. Seals have long shelf lives and can be deposited long after their manufacture. Also, they are highly portable and are known to travel long distances. The majority of seals in the CNS, corpus diminution, are stated stylistically on the strength of similarity with seals from closed or close contexts, again reiterating the ideas of groups, connections between motives, ideas, and engraving technique. But ultimately, it comes down to whether we trust the identifications made and the dates assigned en masse. Overall, I see no problem with the macro view dating schema as applied by the CMS. However, it understandably lacks nuance and tends cautiously towards late dating. Yet it is this low resolution of the scheme that allows further investigation of nuances, and therefore I consider it a predominantly useful tool rather than a hindrance. On this basis, I have utilised the CMS assigned dates for the study of seals, with provision that the range of possible dates are always considered in each case. Colour as an explicit variable with which to analyse cultural material and language unequivocally entered anthropology and archaeology in the 1960s, after such studies as Victor Turner's influential 1967 work on Ndembu colour symbolism and Berlin and Kay's 1969 cross-cultural linguistic schema of basic colour terms. Berlin and Kay's particularly influential schema proposed a staged neo-evolutionary approach to the adoption of colour terminology in societies, a model that particularly appealed to archaeologists engaged with semiotics. They proposed, after interviewing native speakers of 20 languages, and based on published data from 78 other languages, that basic colour terms appeared in language according to a certain hierarchy, where white, black and red were the first three to appear, followed by further terms, yellow and green, then blue, brown, purple, pink, orange and grey, or some combination of these. This was determined by asking their interviewees to list their basic colour terms, and then select months-old colour chips that were the best example of these terms, and then to select all the chips that could be seen in each of the category of terms. The study used 320 chips of varying hues, all at maximum saturation of each hue, as well as 9 chips in a gradient from white to black. Unsurprisingly, they found that the language in which there was the greatest number of basic colour terms was English, also the language in which the study was conducted. Berlin and Kay found that their data reflected the development of colour terms in language from simple to complex, with English at the top. Their study proposed that, contrary to the Whorf hypothesis, which holds that framework of language and conceptual terms mediates perception, that instead it is perception that determines colour, and in turn that language responds to this perceptual reality. This deduction was based on early iterations of opponent process theory, which hold that our neurophysiological system cannot create blends of colours opposed to each other in the chromatic wheel, and therefore the lack of colour terms in language related to a neurophysiological inability to perceive particular colours. In the late 1970s, in response to further findings, Kay and McDaniel refined and expanded the original study to produce a relatively complex evolutionary schema with a progression of colour terms that allowed for greater variability. Nevertheless, these studies have since been heavily criticised as being universalising and monolithic. Many researchers consider that the neurophysiological leap between language and perception is not justified by the findings. Others criticise the method, in particular, that the use of highly saturated colour chips negated the possibility that different colour terms exist in language at less saturated values, and also reflect the Western tendency towards saturated, matte, homogeneous colours as the ideal template for each colour category. The study did not include other visual factors such as shine, light and dark, or variegation, and other terms that could be considered discrete colour categories in their native languages, and which cannot be conveyed through the use of a months-old colour chart. In the 1980s, John Baines conducted a study of ancient Egyptian colour terms in relation to paint colour, largely in reference to the Berlin and Kay study. His work largely agreed with their linguistic findings. However, he effectively demonstrated that the number of paint colours used at any given time exceeded the number of colour terms in language. He also modified the schema of Berlin and Kay to include the colour term variegated, Egyptian sub, which he inserts after gru in the flowchart. This term is used largely in relation to animal skins, bird plumage, and snake skins. He also notes the presence of a term for variegation in Akkadian, Burumu, and Sumerian, Gungunu, citing an earlier study by Landsberger of Mesopotamian colour terms. Landsberger notes that in the Harahubulu, a lexical list from Earth 3, there are also words for indicators of brilliance, including Boltu, vividly shiny, Namru, shiny, Sabtu, matte, Pusulu, dull, and Suranitu, glassy. There are also late Assyrian words for transparent or translucent, Suru, and possibly rakbu, which means fresh, transparent, reflective, or polished. In Aegean Bronze Age scholarship, there is a traditional emphasis on determining meaning and symbolism in iconography. And explorations of colour have largely drawn on this framework. For example, Mark Peters has examined colour symbolism in relation to mineral composition of pigments. Helene Whitaker has looked at colour symbolism in dress and adornment. Jeff Soles has looked at colour in relation to beads and mock-offs. And many have debated the way that gender is conveyed through symbolic skin colour devices, which is this. Some of these approaches are drawn on the semiotic and anthropological models of the 1960s, wherein symbolism is assumed to be present and detectable in structural relationships between categories. Similarly, neo-evolutionary models have been employed, for example, in discussing changes from monochromatic to polychromatic preferences from the early Bronze to the late Bronze Aegean. Fritz Blackholmer looks at a broadly linear movement between monochromatic and polychromatic preferences from the early Bronze Age to the late Bronze Age Aegean. For the later periods, Blackholmer draws a comparison between chromatic media and linguistic evidence by turning to linear V terms for colour, particularly a term describing the pelage of bulls, or nokoso, equating to inoxosos, or wine-coloured. Yet, several key researchers have taken a different approach and focus on the visual properties of material in relation to light, rather than symbolism through colour categories. Karen Foster, in her discussions of Minoan faience, has explored these both compositionally and in terms of colour and contrast. She notes that the luminosity and brilliance of faience and vitreous materials may have been a factor in their being prized, arguing that their visual properties afforded them religious significance. Similarly, her studies of wall paintings has led her to highlight the importance of light phenomena in Minoan art, in particular colour contrast and refraction or reflection. She argues that the fundamental principle is contrast, whether between light and dark, or dullness and brilliance. She notes that many wall paintings of animals depict counter-shading and emphasise colour change, and attempt to depict iridescence and luminosity in bird plumage. For example, speckles, dots, granulation and patterning. See, for example, the red speckled neck of the rock dove, which you can't quite see this, and also here. Yes, the high contrast black and white wing feathers of the bird, the partridge fresco. Foster's fascinating insight to colour use in relation to animal pelage and light phenomena highlights the probability that Minoan fresco artists were both aware of the interaction of light with things and, importantly, were interested in depicting it. This leads us to further explore questions relating to the use of light, shadow, shine, brightness, gloss, reflectance in other areas of the Aegean Bronze Age. A notably comprehensive study of colour in Aegean material has been conducted by Carol Gillis, who through her research in Aegean metals and the grave goods from the chamber tombs at Assisi, has proposed a system for the study of colour that also takes shininess into account. Gillis has importantly emphasised that visual properties of objects have traditionally been overshadowed by questions of their socio-economic value or provenance, a convention that I've also noticed in relation to seals. Borrowing from the art historian John Gage, Gillis's methodology characterises colour in terms of hue, volume, value, and saturation or chroma, where hue refers to a unique colour, saturation and chroma refer to the intensity or strength, and value is pertaining to lightness, shininess, or brightness. The 2010 study revealed interesting trends, that grave goods tended to have high shininess values, and that she argued that this constitutes an important aspect of their inclusion as grave goods. After shine as a factor, she found that yellow and white items predominated, followed by blue and then dark shiny objects. While her study constitutes important steps in the observation and categorisation of colour, it falls down in some areas. Her measurements of colours were subjectively determined in a relative sphere using discursive boundaries for colour categories. Furthermore, she reduced variegated materials to either the dark category or the unknown category, leaving them unexplored and categorically invisible. Finally, her categorisation of translucent materials such as rock crystal was defined as white, which overlooks and masks the primary property of rock crystal, which is that it is a transmissive medium and is permeable to light. However, The transmissive properties of rock crystal and minerals have been observed in other studies. For example, Marina Panigataki discovered the possibility that the rock crystal disc from the temple repositories was used as a reflective surface in religious ceremonies in order to focus or amplify light. Similarly, the use of foil-back rock crystal inlays in contexts such as the Knoscian Draftport indicate the conscious use of clear rock crystal as a transmissive medium. Stefania Klubaraki, in her work on gypsum, emphasises its natural brilliance and light-amplifying qualities, no doubt responsible for its use in dados in interior architecture. Her study and the selection of preference for particular types of microcrystalline gypsum led her to suggest that Minoan interiors were, quote, rather shiny and sparkly, as the gypsum crystals reflected sunlight or lamplight. In the case of Aegean seals, colour has been addressed in a number of ways. As a reflection of functions, John Younger has argued that the colour of a seal may have determined its hierarchical or relative role in an administrative set of seals, in which a blue and a red seal would have an adjunct relationship. Others have seen colour as symbolic. For example, Andrew Chaplin, with his study of animal depictions on seals, found a moderate correlation between blue, green and clear stones and marine-themed iconography. More recently, Julie Fruby has provided one of the more intriguing diachronic statistical studies, which has allowed her to pose interesting questions relating to how seals were used as symbols for communication and display. She argues that the decreasing size of seals meant that symbolism was conveyed through material-related colour, shape and adornment style. Her statistical analysis of around 1,500 Cretan seals led her to argue that seal size was at its largest in early Minoan 3 and Middle Minoan 1, and then decreased significantly into MM2 before a slight increase again in MM3 and LM1. She maintains that despite the small increase after MM2, sizes are still significantly smaller than they had been in the earlier periods. She ties this decrease to the introduction of the bow lathe and the increasing use of hard stones in bright colours. Her study importantly notes the increasing prevalence of translucent and variegated hard stones over time. However, she does not pose any explanations for this occurrence. The aesthetics of seals have long been considered one of their primary aspects. Sir John Boardman, for example, has mused that the sheer beauty of some banded or translucent stones would have recommended them at any time. Beauty and aesthetic appeal have been used as reasoning in arguments explaining the increased use of variegation and translucent stones, relating to rarity, value, and prestige through display of exotic material. Value assignment through rarity has been a staple argument, somewhat filtered through antiquarian notions. However, the idea that hard stone seals were more valuable than soft stone has held less sway in the last decade, and has been particularly challenged by Krzyzewska, who admits to complete bewilderment in relation to value assignment of seal material, and warns against applying modern conceptions of material value in the discussion of seals. Whether certain materials were valuable, we don't know. But the qualities of stones certainly played an important role in their function as seals, as well as reflect a more generalised interest in variegation that can be seen in architecture, stone vessels and frescoes. For example, at Knossos, variegated banding was applied in the form of real cut slabs of gypsum, as well as in painted fresco dados. Similar banded frescoes have been found in Hanyard, lining a lustral basin. This once again points towards the importance of variegation, light, dark and shine in Aegean Bronze Age art. Looking back to the Near East, we find further interesting parallels for descriptions of stone properties. The Abu Shikinshu stone list describes stones using similes relating to texture as well as contrast. Lapis and carnelian are divided into different categories based on modelling, and other stones are described based on their nature as blotched or striped. Interestingly here, the descriptions highlight variegation patterns, colours, and in at least one case, luminosity. There are a number of parallels between stone characteristics and animal pelage or bird plumage. See, for example, lines 16 and 19, where the black and white hoolaloo is considered birdwing hoolaloo. Of course, we can't infer exactly what about the back of a frog is like the stone kuroganu, but the use of animal and plant characteristics as similes indicates qualitative similarities that defy categorical colours and point towards sophisticated nuances in determining variegation and modelling. For this reason, it's problematic to characterise visual properties as reducible to our notion of colour, as an isolated variable based on hue. But instead, they have a bevy of characteristics incorporating texture, shine, translucency, variegation, and other unknown qualities, probably, and most likely, magical. So variegation and translucency might be important, but why? Apart from general tendency towards the appreciation of these qualities, what is it about the function and role of seals that makes these particular qualities desirable? Is it simple prestigious display, as has been suggested for a long time? Or is it symbolism and social grouping through colour choices? Is it a preference for hard, durable materials that could last? Or is it magico-religious? My angle is that all of these factors are important when considered in relation to adornment. However, in relation to the function of the seal, both variegation and translucency have the effect of reducing the immediate visibility of seal engraving on the stone. This phenomenon might have been exploited functionally as a low-level security measure, given that seals are the carriers of socio-economic signification used in transactions and documents. This reduction in visibility has been noted by several scholars. However, it has been positioned as a mere side effect of using hard, variegated stones rather than a possible motivation for using them. As yet, no one has sought to explore this. The correlation between hard stone and variegation is reasonably evident. However, I would also like to explore whether soft stones demonstrate similar chronological preferences towards variegation. This requires a look at the connection between technology and material change. When does the use of hard, variegated and translucent stones increase exactly? Minoan Neopalatial was proposed by Younger as marking the introduction of the drill lathe to cut seals, explaining the subsequent increased use of hard stones. Experimental archaeology, conducted by Gold and Gwinnett, has demonstrated that in order to cut hard stone higher than Mohs 5.5, an abrasive is needed, which was probably emery from Naxos. However, it could also be flint hand tools, which we know could engrave cylinders. The role of the lathe has been seen as a prime determinant of seal shapes, material, and iconographic styles, and in particular, has been seen as has been asserted as a formative or defining factor in the shape and prevalence of biconvex seals. For example, the CMS glossary, in defining the hardstone technique, assert that the need to present the seal to the tool led to the development of convex seal faces. Yet there is nothing that prevents a flat face from being used, or any other shape being made with a bow lathe. For example, the first hardstone seals cut with the lathe were those of the old flat-faced shapes, four-sided prisms, discs, and pet shafts. The wholesale shift away from these shapes came well after the proposed introduction of the lathe. Similarly, there is nothing to say that biconvex shapes were directly related to the bow lathe, as both hard and soft stone biconvex lentoid and amygdaloid-shaped beads have been found in contexts dating between early Minoan 3 and MM2. For example, grave goods from Moneologithria. So instead of looking to technology as formative, we need to consider other factors. The biconvex shape with central perforation seems designed for wearing on the body, probably in the form of jewellery. Later fresco, ceramic and glyptic iconography tell us that biconvex seals were probably worn most frequently as bracelets. Amygdaloid seals develop faceting on the reverse sides, which in some cases is so pronounced that a seal could only be worn as a bracelet, with the engraved side flat, facing towards the skin, or worn loose as a necklace. Similarly, after LM2, lentoid seals begin to be cut with conoid reverse sides, which again, in some cases are very pronounced and would be very uncomfortable worn at the wrist if set face down. Perhaps then, the desire to keep the seal close to the body, with the engraving concealed, contributed to the changes in shape. As Fruby has argued, a decrease in overall volumetric size between MM1 and MM2 seems to complement this idea, as similar sizes are less visible. However, as this calculation was made using the overall volume of the seal, it does not have direct relevance to the size of the seal face. In looking only at seal face area, it can be seen that there is a concomitant increase in size over these periods, which needs to be explained in a different way. A recently proposed idea by Artemis Carnival might explain this size increase, two proposals based on seal-impressed clay documents found at Akrotiri that administrative seal use in LM1 could be understood as a series of hierarchical relations based on seal face size. This idea is an intriguing possibility to explain increasing seal face area from middle Minoan 3 onwards, with size as a possible relation of social or administrative function. The use of both hard and soft stones between increases after MM2, perhaps indicating a greater number of seal owners and a greater discrepancy between them. I will be exploring this socioeconomic aspect further as part of my doctoral research, where I consider the relationships between changing administrative practices, seal technology, and interregional networks in the Neopalatial period. The broader context of my research looks at sphagistic security by investigating the invisibility of intaglio on seal stones, alongside changes in administrative systems. I believe choice of material is intimately linked with the function of seals as devices used in transactions. But in order to discuss this, I need to explore the link between stone material and visibility by understanding the phenomenology of vision and the ways that variegation, colour and light impact on visual comprehension. While the phenomenon of invisibility has been readily observed in hard stone seals, high contrast materials of any kind that have frequent variegation effectively mask engraving by visually ambiguating shadow contrast with colour differentiation. This effect is amplified when surface texture is uniformly polished to create specular gloss and reduces observable texture difference between surfaces. Highly translucent and transparent stones have a similar effect of masking engraving through diffuse light transmission, high reflectance, and reduction of shadowing through internal light scattering that results in a diffuse glow. Interestingly, slimmer biconvex seal profiles allow for greater light transmission than earlier Petschafter and prisms. So the question remains, how can we study these fascinating qualities of stones? While much work has already been done in relation to colour in Aegean Bronze Age material, these studies have largely focused on colour categorisation and symbolism. Underlining many of these studies is an inconsistent or absent colour measurement, which leaves colour description in the discursive sphere, reliant on linguistic terms of colours. In the realm of Aegean seals, colorimetric information is just not available, and so to explore and discuss visual phenomena, it would benefit us to utilise a reproducible and communicable colour measurement system. A robust atomised method for the measurement of colour would allow us to quantify degrees of variegation in both frequency and contrast, as well as assess degrees of translucency. A similar need for consistent colour recording has recently been identified by Ruiz and Pereira in the imaging of rock art, as a replacement for the widespread use of the standard IFRAO, International Federation of Rock Art Organisation, colour scale for the calibration and correction of digital images. The IFRAO scale unfortunately lacks definitive colorimetric information about its printed colours. Furthermore, the 4 colours present on the scale are insufficient for digital calibration of images to the human gamut of colour perception. The scale, which was introduced in 1991, is no longer relevant to the way that digital corrections are made to images to ensure accurate presentation and recording of colour. Furthermore, the IFRAO scale has also been subject to frequent abuses and incorrect use, such as printing out your own at home, further invalidating its use as a standard for colour calibration. Also prevalent in archaeology is the ubiquitous Munsell soil colour chart, used in soil and ceramic analysis. The Munsell chart continues to retain its usefulness as a colour standard against which comparisons can be made, and providing terminology with which discussions can be had. Nevertheless, drawbacks to Munsell charts are that they have limited colour range, making them inappropriate for a range of materials, including stone. And there is significant gradation between colour chips, and for this reason, allow a wide range of interpretive scope in colour matching, largely due to phenomena known as colour constancy, just noticeable difference, and adaptation, which are the result of values of human perceptual sensitivities. However, as I will soon discuss, the underlying structure of the Munsell colour space is the conceptual base for sophisticated device-independent colour spaces, including SILO, HSV, which is hue saturation value, and HCl, hue chroma lightness. In many industries where control of colour is important, direct object colour imagery is performed using a spectrophotometer that measures spectral reflectance as a function of wavelength and records this as relating to stellar colour space. However, in some industries, this method has been challenged as the small patches of colour obtained by spectrophotometry do not relate as well to human experience of the complex interactions of colour over a wider viewing area. Though the readings are spectrally accurate, there is significant difference between the colorimetric readings and perceptual colour view in context, especially in the food industry, where properties such as gloss have important correlations with food quality. This has led to the use of computer vision systems, or CVSs, that use digital photography and colour calibration techniques as a form of colorimetry for larger or more complex areas of interest. Digital imaging for segmentation analysis and colorimetric information has had a long history of various research and industrial applications, such as the identification of plant species using aerial photography, the study of colour difference in birds, and as a method of identifying minerals in the mining industry. Colorimetry using a system of calibrated digital images is appropriate for the study of colour, variegation, and translucency in aegean seals. However, to use colour as a form of measurement, we first need to understand it phenomenologically. The study of colour has in recent years expanded so that the once discrete spheres of physics, physiology, psychophysics, psychology, and phenomenology, all once competing to explain human visual perception, particularly colour, are now used in complementary ways and are understood as encompassing a relational system through which humans process and perceive external stimuli. Colour vision can thus be understood as a long chain of operations, the study of which has been divided out between these different physical and human sciences, beginning with physical properties of light, physics, the optical reception, physiology and biology, the translations of visual sensation, storage and recall, neurophysiology, and then subjective perception and discrimination of appearance are studied by psychology and phenomenology, and the measurements of particular contexts of sensation. These include the curia that make colour vision non-linear and non-uniform, and which warp absolute measurements of particular contexts of sensation. Finally, the methods through which these phenomena are measured by physical and cognitive tasks of perception is called psychophysics. As Newton observed, the rays, to speak, they are not coloured. In them there is nothing else but a certain power and disposition to stir up a sensation of this or that colour. However, he wasn't the first to observe this. Subjective aspects of colour have been recognised as far back as ancient Greece by Democritus, who considered that sensations, including colour, were states of the human body caused by the influx of atoms. He was followed in this by both Galileo, who considered colours as residing only in consciousness, and John Locke, who considered colour as a sensation produced in humans by the primary qualities of objects, based on the definition of hierarchical qualities by the physicist Boyle. However, colour has also been viewed as primarily physical and real and external, beginning with Aristotle, who considered that colour was physically embedded in objects, the observation of which required light and a transmissive medium to reach the eye. Aristotle considered that white light degraded on interaction with objects, resulting in colour. The German polymath Goethe rehashed this Aristotelian argument in his 1840 missal Theory of Colours, in which he considered light and dark as having opposing powers, and that colour occurred where the two powers met. Although strictly speaking not correct, Goethe is well known for his accurate observations of colour phenomena, particularly toptic colour, something that led him to predict later opponent colour theory in the creation of symmetrical colour, as you see here. Trichromatic colour vision was devised by Hermann von Helmholtz in 1867 as a way of explaining the phenomenon of additive colour mixing, in which two saturated lights, for example, cyan and yellow, could produce the sensation of white, and where three lights in various mixtures could produce all visible colour sensations. Helmholtz, drawing on Young and Maxwell, conceived that there were three photoreceptors in the eye, sensitive to red, blue, and green respectively. However, his theory did not account well for light and dark, or entoptic colour, which he held to be caused by retinal fatigue. A phenomenological scholar, Ewald Herring, in 1888 proposed that colour sensations were to some degree mutually exclusive or antagonistic. This followed from the visualisation of colours as a wheel, in which no colours could be said to be bluey yellow or reddy green. This led to his theory of opponent process, which in particular opposing colours could not blend, but rather could be in an excited or inhibited state, which would fight for balance. In addition to colour, Herring realised that light and dark were also in an oppositional relationship, but were not mutually exclusive, but gradiated. The ideas of Helmholtz and Herring were accepted as complementary in the 1950s when Herbert and Jameson tied them into a theory of colour vision that demonstrated that trichromacy could fit well with opponent theory and contrast. Since then, it has come to dominate as the basis for the accepted mode of photopic or daylight colour vision and perceptual colour. It is often expressed as small, medium and long wavelength receptors in the eye, equivalent to wavelengths between 400 to 700 nanometers, that when tied into neurophysical and cognitive systems, produce around 1 million perceivable, distinguishable colours in trichromats, fewer colours in various types of dichromats, who have impairment in long, medium or short wavelengths, but even more visible colours in tetrachromats, who probably see part of the ultraviolet spectrum, and which have recently been demonstrated to exist in families where dichromacy is prevalent. Human experience of colour can be conceptualised as occupying a three-dimensional space. Models of colour space in 3 dimensions have been with us for centuries. Newton's colour wheel was not envisioned explicitly as a 3-dimensional space. However, he considered it modifiable by light and dark, in this sense becoming a 3D. This was rendered by artist Philipp Otto Runge in his spherical depiction of colour space. Albert Munsell, in 1905, published a notational colour system that included graded differences between colour chips and refined terms for colour dimensions. These dimensions are hue, lightness, and chroma. However, problems with the system include non-uniform differences between colour chips and difficulty in calculating perceivable differences. As I mentioned before, the way Munsell colour space is organised became the foundation for further colour spaces, including the 1931 Commission Internationale d'Éclairage colour space, CIEXY. This chromaticity system was based on accumulated tests done with specific lighting conditions and various groups of observers, and from which was produced an artificial standard observer who possesses particular colour vision characteristics. The standard observer, though artificial, is an anchor for nebulous phenomena of colour appearance in relation to spectral reflectance, light source, physiological adaptation and cognition, and therefore allows the perceptual system to be broadly related to spectral equivalences in wavelength and electron volts. The 1931 CIEXY colour space, while comprehensive, was shown to have various problems, including non-uniform colour differences, which led to perceptual inconsistencies, for example, an amplified bias towards green. This colour space was revised in the 1970s as 2 spaces, seen here as the Scilab chromaticity diagram and the Scilab space, which involves a nonlinear transform of colours to produce a space that better represented the gamut of human colour vision, the relationships between colours, based on just noticeable difference, and opponent colour theory. Based on further colour match testing, these systems used an updated 1964 standard observer to plot colour in terms of A, which is red to green, and B, yellow to blue, horizontal coordinates, representing the oppositional relationship between the hues, and a vertical L-axis relating to light and dark. Based on these 3 coordinates, the difference between 2 colours can be understood as a measure of Euclidean distance, expressed as a function called delta E. This is possible because the psi systems I've described are device-independent, or exist in arbitrary space only in relation to the perception of light under known conditions with a standardized observer. They differ inherently from more commonly used colour spaces, which are device-dependent, such as standard RGB and CMYK, the colour appearance of which are tied to particular displays. These are the colour spaces typically used in the capture of JPEG, bitmap and other digital images, which means colour information is rendered to these spaces upon the capture of the image. Unfortunately, images taken in this way exclude a significant proportion of the human visual gamut. Additional adjustments to the use of Scilab colour space continue to be made in the form of algorithms to account for particular perceptual inconsistencies in human colour vision and cognition. These are nonlinear interactions of the colour coding and visual system, or where we perceive colours and contrasts in ways that are not predicted using a linear model. This occurs in many circumstances, but which can be described as the following groups of phenomena: light and chromatic adaptation, colour constancy, and simultaneous contrast. Light adaptation involves the transition of indifference of light levels and the correspondence to photopic and scopic vision systems, like now. Light adaptation produces entoptic responses in the eye when conditions change. Chromatic adaptation is the phenomenon of cognitively controlling the effect of a light source on the colour of an environment, which can result in perceived colour constancy, or that objects appear roughly the same colour under different lighting conditions. An interesting way of demonstrating this is to stare at the white dot in the centre of the screen and try to maintain focus on the dot without moving your eyes. The subsequently presented image will appear differently coloured, which is the result of your eyes and cognitive system attempting to standardise the illuminant. The effect will disperse as your eyes adjust to the new illuminant. That was just for fun. The most fascinating set of effects, however, and relevant to looking at variegation in seals, are those of simultaneous contrast. This applies to both chromatic and lightness contrast, when the background of the object will affect its perceived hue and lightness, which becomes relevant for both photography of seals on different backgrounds and also the perception of internal variegation in the seal itself. The Chubb illusion, also known as contrast gain control, describes the perception that apparent contrast is greater when a complex variegated patch is viewed against a neutral background, as opposed to when it's viewed in a similar complex background. This also applies when the dark and light parts of the image are seen as contiguous with their surroundings, or contrasted. This effect is also influenced by the overall spatial frequency of variegation, wherein infrequent changes in contrast will have a lower contrastive effect on the patch than moderately frequent. High spatial frequency variations are blended together to seem as though they are a uniform background. Relative differences of spatial frequency between the object and background will also increase contrast. High contrast materials used for seals may have similar visual effects as those described in the Chubb illusion, as moderate levels of variegation effectively mask engraving by visually ambiguating shadow contrast with colour differentiation. This effect is amplified when surface texture is uniformly polished to create specular gloss and reduces observable texture difference between surfaces. So, the goal of summarising and demonstrating these phenomena is to provide the basis for discussing the measurement of colour as applied by a computer vision system, and also to problematise potential discrepancies between objective measurements, even as they are modelled in relation to human visual colour space, and human visual experience, as in the case of these several known perceptual effects. In this way, I hope to outline a methodology that at once harnesses a system for empirical measurement, while also constrained and informed by perceptual idiosyncrasies. The use of colorimetric space allows for seals to be compared, and which can be used for the basis of further discussion of colour, gloss, translucency, and other visual phenomena as they relate to the material properties of seals. In order to use MATLAB colour space for digital photography, we need to adhere to the fixed conditions as set out by the CIE, described in ISO standards, which also include controlled lighting conditions, known illuminant, and the measurement of ambient light. Also, the use of a viewing box, which assists in controlling light, which has a diffuse achromatic matte surface inside for the scattered reflection of light. The illuminant should be at 45 degrees to the angle of the object, and the camera at 90 degrees. Colour calibration charts are standardised tables of colour with known Scilab values produced on matte plastic. The most widely used of these is the X-ray colour checker, which I use. Photographing with DSLR in RAW format allows images to be captured in device-independent space, and their lighting properties to be readily manipulated. This is important as it allows for a calibration profile to be made from a photograph of the colour checker chart under known lighting conditions, and from that, produce a transform that will calibrate digital images to a best fit match for those colours in those lighting conditions, known as the DNG profile. The profile takes the particular characteristics of the camera into account, which differs between individual cameras, models and brands. The DNG, or digital negative profile, can be batch applied to photographs in Adobe Lightroom, making this process extremely fast. This gets us to the first step, ensuring that photographs can be matched using the colour chart and silo space. To clarify, this is not in any way the real colour of seals. There's no such thing, just a relative measurement system where they're all under the same conditions, allowing them to be consistently compared. Tying these measurements into a known industry standard method of calibration allows the process to be widely repeated. The siloed colour space, as previously mentioned, uses the function of Euclidean distance to express colour difference, known as delta E. This is both a way of transforming images to match in calibration, and a way of using digital images to explore differences in colour based on material or light. The value of delta E less than 3 is print industry and research standard for colour difference that is below perceivable threshold. A delta E of around 3 is a measurement also described as just noticeable difference, a metric which was considered present in testing when 50% of test subjects, only 50% of test subjects could perceive a difference between the values of two stimuli. Therefore, to test the perceivable difference between the known siloed values of the colour chart and those obtained in calibrated photographs, we use the delta E measurement, a process called tolerance thresholding. In the colorimetric rock art study by Ruiz and Pereira, rock art was sampled using various colorimetric techniques, including Munsell, iPad apps, spectrophotometer, and this digital and color calibration technique. The researchers found that the digital method had the least error for delta E perceivable differences, with delta E values of less than 3 in most cases. This is echoed in other studies, especially in the food industry, where digital cameras using color calibration techniques consistently outperformed analytical spectrophotometers in capturing perceptually accurate color information. An important point to stress here is that the measurement of imagery in the case of food, rock art, or seals is that the colours are relevant to human perceptual boundaries and sensitivities, rather than recording light information in the form of spectral reflectance or wavelengths. For this reason, colorimetry rather than photometry can be performed using readily available equipment such as digital cameras, which exist purely to capture colours in a range and quality comparable to human perception, and are therefore suitable for these tasks within the outlined constraints. So, my study will be based on photographs of 250 Cretan seals from data contexts, and where possible, I have chosen seals whose stylistic properties are closely related to their data context. I've selected a diachronic range of seals of all material types. However, the majority I've chosen are datable to MM2 and after, in order to concentrate on the changes in the visual appearance of material after the introduction of the lithography layer. As supplement for information relating to size, shape, and material category, my study also utilises published data of around 1,200 Cretan seals from excavated contexts, which have been dated stylistically by the CMS. My method is to photograph each seal under these 3 lighting conditions and 1 alternate background condition. Top lit with a D65 daylight fluorescent illuminant on a white surround, top lit on a black surround, backlit with a diffuse illuminant on white surround, and then both top and backlit on white surround simultaneously. I chose these forms of illumination to adhere to the recommendations of standard illumination by the CIE, with the D65 light set as the standard for white daylight. I used the Nexrite i1 Display 2 digital calibration device to measure ambient light in each of the conditions, which assists in correcting colour temperature at the processing stage. Top-lit photographs return spectral information about the illuminant, as well as the colour of the object, in the form of specular and diffuse reflection. In the case of dark materials, they are perceived as reflecting light that is opposite to the colour of the light source, whereas in light-coloured materials, they seem tinged by the colour of the light source. These effects are very slight under 6500K light, but nevertheless should be taken into account. Backlit photographs are useful to characterise and visualise the internal light transmission of seals, but not necessarily to measure it. Rather, the delta E comparison between 2 top-lit photos on black and white backgrounds respectively gives a relative value of translucency. Dual top and backlit photos result in the highest saturation of colour, as reflected light from the surface of the seal is diminished by the lower luminance in the backlight. This lighting mode is the best for capturing balanced colorimetric information. So, the next step is to understand the colour information that has been captured using the CVS. I will be analysing seal imageries to measure two attributes, variegation and translucency. To explore variegation, a calibrated raw image of the seal face is analysed using a segmentation algorithm in R, which clusters colours together based on computational transforms. Different methods can be used, k-means or nearest neighbour. I'm still exploring the best algorithm for this process, but this is some of the ways that you can display the information. The goal of this is to reasonably identify and segment the perceptually homogeneous patches of colour, between which the maximum contrastive difference can be measured, as well as relative contiguous contrast and variegation frequency. The goal here is to see how different seal materials vary, and to understand these variations on a large scale diachronically, geographically, in relation to shape, size, or iconography. The measurement of contrast can be used to explore degrees and types of variegation, either inside a category of material, comparing categories, comparing individual seals, or even two sides of the same seal. Colour information of this sort will, in part, allow for suspension of categorical terms in order to explore colorimetric similarities between seals outside material designations. To explore light transmission, I will calculate a translucency parameter, TP, by photographing the seal in both a white and black background and calculating the difference using delta E, where the difference should be reflected in the lightness values. This is a technique borrowed from dentistry, where ceramic and resin composites are tested for changing translucency over time in response to various stress conditions. To allow for variegation in the seal, the same colour clustering method will be used here, but instead of measuring internal variegation, the delta E measurement will be compared between the two photographs, and the difference value expressed as a measure of translucency. Unlike dental composites, seals are not internally homogeneous, and so it's important for me to stress that translucency is not being analytically measured, given the many variations in thickness, variegation of the material, internal light scattering, and surface patination. Rather, TP is only an indicator of relative apparent translucency. Translucency of materials is a quality that continues to vex researchers, as it is not able to be precisely modelled, and the perceptual cues that indicate translucency are still not well understood. So this parameter is a temporary measure to indicate translucency within a relative scale, not in any complex or absolute way. But this process is also corrected using a set of nonlinear transforms to account for the surround and lightness contrast effects, or the difference between in perceived lightness, colourfulness, and hue as a result of being on different backgrounds. Okay, I'm going to sum up now. So this talk has not been exhaustive, but it has covered a lot of ground to demonstrate the reasoning behind and need for the CVS tax system and its possible applications. This study is just one component of my overall study of seals as security devices in administrative transactions between the late Protopalatial to the end of the Neopalatial period, and as such, the questions I've asked relate directly to my interest in this. I found it necessary to put together the study of colour, translucency and variegation in order to better understand the relationship between the aesthetic qualities of seal materials and their potential function, and how it's changed over time. I particularly wanted to interrogate the transition from soft stones and organic material to hard stones, and the relationship between material types and technological, social and administrative influences. In doing so, I realised that a lack of colour information comprised a significant disconnect in research, and that it warranted more detailed study and a robust methodology. This in turn led to the exploration of current understandings of light, colour and material interactions, and the transformation of these into a usable method in the application of the study of seals. I was also pleasantly surprised that my preliminary observations of seal material are echoed in other areas of Minoan colour research, especially regarding contrast and light. For these reasons, I feel that the choices of stone in Bronze Age Crete may reflect both specific qualities chosen for their use as seal devices, but also general conceptual preferences for contrast and luminosity that can be seen echoed across different Bronze Age media. And although I have chosen to analyse colour using methods based on my particular interests, Once the photographs have been taken and calibrated, they can be used in any number of different forms for colorimetric analysis and for many sorts of questions. For example, with these photographs, I hope to also look at specular gloss as a measure of surface texture and use the profiles of seals for analysis of wear marks at the edges of their perforations. Increasing colorimetric nuance by using calibrated digital photos may not only help us to better understand colour preferences, but may highlight alternate categorical constructions. The suspension of discursive colour categories for atomization of colorimetric information may help to find meaningful relationships between types of colour, like light, dark, contrast, shine, and other categorical variables as yet unknown. In this way, there is scope for this sort of colorimetric data to be used in relation to many other types of queries, such as whether there are relationships between seal cover and iconography, style, engraving depth, whatever you like. I hope that tonight that I have demonstrated that the interaction of light and material is an important consideration in the study of Aegean seals, and that understanding the mechanisms of colour perception is key in conducting further investigations into the study of colour. Thank you.